next speaker is Dan Dauwalter. He is the TU's fisheries scientist in our Boise, Idaho office, and Dan will be presenting on crowdsourcing water quality data in the Driftless. So you can take it away, Dan. I see your presentation.
Okay, good. Thanks for the kind introduction, Sarah. Yesterday and this morning, you've all been hearing about the Driftless Area as an incredible landscape with a unique topography in the upper Midwest due to lack of recent glaciation, and the incredible aquatic resources in the region, including hundreds of miles of trout streams. And those streams are not without issue. We know, there's been historical impacts from past land uses, a lot of upland erosion, gullying, vertical accretion of floodplains with sediment deposition, which is stream bank erosion, but also it's an agricultural landscape, and nutrients are being applied to that landscape. All of these things have sort of come together to I guess have led to streams within the region being impaired. So this map on the right shows the streams that are on the federal 303D list as being impaired for temperature, sediment, nutrients, or other factors. So back in 2018, started talking with Carter Borden, who's principal of Mobile H2O. And they, at the time, were just developing this mobile application, now called the Wise H2O app. And the app is intended to, or characterizes water quality using test strip and colorimetric algorithms to use test strip technology to characterize various water quality analytes, as well as it'll take some user contributed inputs. So, the core of the app is, dip a test strip similar to something you test your pool or hot tub water quality with, or maybe your drinking water. Put it against a calibration card, take a picture. There's an algorithm that converts those colors into values. It displays on the app, and then there's informational or interpretive information behind what those values mean and its impacts on aquatic health. And, as I mentioned, there's sort of some background water quality analytes, alkalinity, hardness, pH that can reflect, for example, the underlying geology of a watershed or a stream, as well as nitrate, nitrite concentration, some nutrients. Crops. The app, uses test strip technology to measure those water quality parameters. There's a phosphorus element to it, which is another test strip based test that you do external to the app, but it allows you to input values and allows people making these observations using the app to enter information on stream temperature, take a photograph, document disturbances, fish passage barriers, bank erosion, trash, drainage, outflows, livestock in the stream, etc., as well as characterize some background information. What's the stream flow in the stream? Is that base flow or bank full or overbank flooding? What's the water clarity? Things that we know are sort of background information that can help interpret some of the water quality parameters, including recent weather events. Was there something recent? Is there snow melt? Was there regional rainfall and runoff associated with that affects water levels and essentially water quality parameters? So in conversation with Carter, the app is built around water quality, but also nutrients. We thought we needed to pilot this thing in an agricultural landscape. And the Driftless came up because there's a restoration economy, a big conservation ethic in the region, but there are water quality issues. And so we piloted a project with the Cactus chapter in 2019. We did a workshop around this spring before the core monitoring season, came up with a monitoring plan I had both target anglers that would monitor monthly at fixed site locations, as well as general anglers that would simply collect data as they were out fishing. And over the course of the summer in 2019, we had 60 observations come in, 46 with the 5-in-1 test strip, 41 phosphate measurements, temperature, et cetera. But this told us that, TU chapters or people in general would help collect this information with a little bit of guidance to not only educate themselves about the resources in their backyard, but also crowdsource information across the region. And so we expanded in 2020. The goals of the expansion were continued engagement of anglers and other folks interested in water quality in the region. Wanted to leverage those folks' interest in crowdsourcing water, educate those folks, but also develop a database of actionable data. So characterize water, trout streams, or any stream really, because people can collect data wherever they want, and highlight potential management needs across the region. So in 2020, we did the region-wide rollout, which of course is when sort of COVID hit, which pumped the brakes on some of what we were trying to do, but we did outreach. And it was really while we couldn't, it was recommended we didn't meet with folks in person. It was a great opportunity to get outside because there wasn't much else you could do, at least when it first hit. So, our rollout got over the COVID speed bump. We contacted the 12 chapters within the Driftless area, but also 3 others in the Chicago area that like to come up to the Driftless to fish. We seeded those chapters with free test kits, and made some app improvements, and just communicated this program through webinars, the Driftless Symposium, a workshop that was a couple weeks pre-COVID, and sort of did this regional rollout, which continued in 2021. So in 20, Captowish was continuing to monitor in Pierce County, which is the northern end of the Driftless, but we onboarded 2 other TU chapters, Twin Cities TU and Hiawatha TU, that had their own monitoring plans. And we were talking with those in 2020, but they were fully onboarded in 2021. Again, we're communicating through the symposium, training webinars, and we continued through last year. Was just to note that we did stumble over a funding gap and had some staff turnover with Jeff Hastings retiring and Sarah coming on board. And might have been a little communication light, but really our vision for this program was that it would be in a lot of ways self-supporting. So we were trying to get the program up and running with the idea it would sort of take off on its own, and there'd be enough interest from folks across the region to crowdsource this information. And this picture in the upper right is Kent Johnson doing a training with the Hiawatha chapter over in Rochester. Of course, Max masked up. I think that training was in 2020 at some point. And then that bottom schematic just shows, the materials that are needed to use the app, at least the test strip technology. Typically available on the mobileh2o.com website, although currently the store is closed as Carter has been overseas in Nepal doing other consulting work. So we are in the process of doing some batch ordering and reaching out on supply needs. So through 2022, so over this 3-year period, we now have over 1,000 observations in the database. The map shows 20 observations are in red, overlaid by the orange ones, which are 2021, and yellow in 2022. And so you can see, that over the course of time, from red over to yellow, we're sort of seeing an expansion and onboarding of new people, new chapters collecting information in new places. And just a quick note, there is 1,000 observations on this map. There are quite a few sites that have multiple observations, so the points are overlaying or hiding one another. And in some cases, like the Captowish, which has now been monitoring for 4 years at their fixed sites, have up to 20 observations in one spot. Our goals for engagement, we're seeing increased use over time. 2019 was the pilot year with Fabulous Chapter. And you can see the active observers sort of increase over time in this left column, with last year having almost 80 active users, new users coming on board each year, about 30 to 40 per year, and the number of observations per user ranging from not quite 4 to 7.5 in 2021. So we're continuing to engage new people. We're carrying over folks from past years, likely due to chapters with formal monitoring programs and continued engagement, but they're also onboarding new folks. And this schematic just shows the frequency of observations made per user. So not unsurprisingly, most users collect from 1 to 10 observations, and of course those that are engaged in the monitoring programs are committed to doing monitoring once a year at those fixed locations. And so these users that have between 25 and 40 observations, those are folks committed and have been in these monitoring programs a long time. But a bulk of the mass in terms of use rate is between 1 and 10 observations per user, at least to date. But that's changing as those monitoring programs by chapter continue over time. We have increased interest or encouraged participation through by offering drawings for gifts. The last 2 years we've done a September Blitz where each observation gets put in a raffle. Native trout stream, it gets put in twice, with the idea that pique interest to collect data, but also have a chance at earning some TU swag, hats, mugs, fly boxes with flies, satchels, hats, and even a reel this past year. And Eric Hansen, an example, he's wearing a hat, so it must have good luck. I don't think we guaranteed a catch rate with that hat. He's sporting it in this picture along with the brown trout, and it's just an example of one of the users that was interest peaked by the September Blitz and got put in the drawing and won some TU gear. And this is something we sort of anticipating doing into the future to continue to pique interest, but also make it fun and give folks a reason not to just go out and fish, but collect some water quality information along the way. This table, the 3 chapters highlighted are those that have formal monitoring programs, and it just, the app is free to download by anybody, and anybody can contribute, make observations. But this table sort of highlights, those chapters with formal monitoring programs. You can see they have made quite a few observations, way more than the rest, although you do see other chapters activity increase over time as we sort of communicated out. And much of our communication goes to the chapter folks. We did have some seed funding from our TU's Cold Water Conservation Fund Board. So that's, they're the primary targets of our communications and onboarding, but we are communicating with agency folks as well. But just an example of how activity has increased over time, not just within the chapters undertaking or having a formal monitoring plan, but those other chapters that are also increasing in activity just out of pure interest in learning about the streams in their backyard, but also contributing to a regional database. So, those numbers in that table translate to the points on the map. Again, we're at over the last 3 years and hope to we do serve these data on a web map that's available on Mobile H2O's website. So mobileh2o.com/driftless program. Just as a way, to explore the data on a desktop computer. It'll work on your phone, but you can also explore, these data in the app itself. So there's just you just select which attribute you want to look at. Display, the information right on your phone, whether it's bank erosion. People are out making an observation. They know whether they saw bank erosion. That's the panel on the left. Phosphorus concentrations are shown in the middle panel, and then water clarity, something that provides context to the water quality values, but in some ways indicates what people are seeing in terms of fishing conditions at any point in time, if they're on the app frequently enough to see where people are seeing what or noting whether water is high and muddy or it's low and clear and fishable. And so, the long game for this is we're, crowdsourcing a database of water quality information that is, we have education goals, but we also want to characterize water quality on trout streams. But, providing this information on a map, the orange lines there are brook trout streams. So the map also helps, show people where information hasn't been collected yet and could be a place to target, both for fishing and water quality data collection. And again, with the idea that this information could help, highlight areas of concern and stream reaches that may need some type of management. What's shown on this map is the orthophosphate concentrations. So you get a spatial picture. You see where there's some high values, as shown by the red dots. But this tabular summary in the graph essentially shows that the frequency of value of phosphorus concentrations at different levels, and mostly there's quite a few that are at 0, and these test strips are sort of in these categorical bins. There are a few that are at 100 or 200 parts per billion, and then there are some that are quite higher than that, and those are the red ones shown on the map. And past year summaries, we have reports available at mobileh2o.com. In addition to these sort of data reports, we do have activity reports that focus specifically on engagement with not just PU chapters. And ideally, we want to end up with a landscape that's sort of filled in with information, and we can use that information to highlight areas where there's potential nutrient issues. Fake data set of nitrate value. Ideally, we can use this sort of information to identify. But we do recognize that the app is a screening tool. So you make one observation and you get a high value or a red flag. We are encouraging folks to not just pick up the phone and call the regulatory agency. It's a screening tool, so maybe take another replicate observation, or if you're monitoring a station over time and you continue to see values, then maybe that should trigger some more in-depth confirmation through a certified water quality lab, as an example. So one red flag out of 20 observations maybe suggests that it could be an aberrant data point or something throwing the value off, but consistently high values is something that could drive action. And our goal is to outline this actionable data framework in our upcoming report for this due this summer, and provide guidance to those collecting the data on reminding them that it's a screening tool, but consistently high values can be meaningful, that maybe should be validated with a certified lab sample. And so our 2023 goals are to maintain the level of observations we've been seeing in the northern driftless. Twin Cities, Hiawatha, and I think Windcrest is collaborating with Hiawatha. On the Minnesota side, we're filling up the landscapes. We seeing good number of observations come in around populated areas, whether it's Hudson, Wisconsin, across the river from the Twin Cities, or Eau Claire, or around La Crosse. But the more rural areas are where we're being challenged in terms of getting folks participating. So our goal for 23 is to increase the number of chapters involved, and I do think we can get to 2,000 observations by the end of 2023. And I'll explain that in a second, but with the goal of expanding chapter involvement too, from just engagement, getting folks interested in what's going on in their backyard or in the streams where they fish, and get them interested in contributing to a large crowdsourced database. With the idea of going from a landscape with some data gaps to one that's sort of filled out with observation. Maybe not totally by 23, but maybe by the end of 24, 25. And just as an example of how so I work in Trout Unlimited Science Program. I physically reside in Boise, Idaho. Work nationwide with our staff as well as our councils and chapters. So this summer in the Driftless, with all the bipartisan infrastructure law funds and interest on infrastructure in general, road stream crossings are a target from a natural resource standpoint. So we will be running field crews in 4 counties in the Driftless area to survey culverts and determine whether there are barriers to fish passage. And while they're out there surveying culverts, we're also going to have them collect water quality information. And that's one of the reasons I think we can get to 2,000 by the end of, the summer, fall of 2023, because I think we're going to have 2 field crews surveying culverts, but also dipping test strips and using the app. I think they'll hit at least 700 crossings. So that'll, complement what the TU chapters and other interested parties are contributing to the broader database. And as our science program, we're going to use this information on fish passage, and this is just an example of it collected, color-coded by. We'll be complementing and doing these inventories in counties surrounding Monroe and Vernon County and collecting water quality information along the way, with the idea that these data will, the fish data will help us identify interconnected patches of native habitat and help us define those using some online mapping. Then we want to characterize the habitat within those patches, and we can do so using some of the water quality information being crowdsourced across the landscape. So we identify patches of brook trout habitat, characterize the habitat within them, and this is an example of this assessment applied to the Great Lakes, which we're planning to apply in the Driftless in the fall and winter of 24, and we will be reaching out. Basically, those patches of interconnected habitat as defined by fish passage barriers through culvert surveys are characterized by the amount of interconnected habitat, what's the abundance of fish in those places, but also what's the habitat condition within those patches. And there's a variety of different data sets we can use to define whether or not the habitat within those patches is impaired. But the water quality information that we're crowdsourcing will be one piece of information that can go into this style of assessment. In this brook trout conservation portfolio, sort of the name of this assessment has been applied to the Great Lakes. The interest through partners, to use partners like National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, but we've also applied it using the patch information in the Eastern Brook Trout joint venture realm on the East Coast too, which is the that's where the program stands. We're continuing to see increased participation. We hope to expand, including by collecting some data, but we'll feed into some of this assessment work that we're planning to do in the next year and a half. And a lot of this work has been funded through the Driftless Restoration Effort, Fish Habitat Partnership, through TU's Cold Water Conservation Fund, Fish and Wildlife, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and the broader NIFHAP program. So if you want to get involved in 2023, please reach out. We are orders as the mobile H2O shop is down currently, but please reach out, send us an email if you want to get involved or get you set up.
Hey,
Thanks,
Dan. I think your mic is cutting out on us.
Oh,
Yeah. It has been cutting in a little.
okay. Apologize, might be a pickup issue.
Yep.
My laptop's off to the left.
So we do have a couple questions for you from the Q&A panel. One is whether or not we prefer new locations or have a preference toward long-term repeated monitoring at existing sites. I don't know if you want to give a perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean they're both useful. I would like to see the map filled out, but there is, questions about, given the resolution of the test strip technology and the binning, that it's a screening tool and it gives you a certain level of resolution, whether or not we can sort of see long-term trends there. But like I said, the Captoish chapter has, I think, 10 fixed sites where they've been monitoring for 4 years now. And the other, Twin Cities spokes and Hiawatha do have fixed monitoring sites. So it would be nice to have some fixed sites elsewhere, like in southwestern Wisconsin, but there's interest in seeing sort of the map filled out with new observations in new places.
Yeah, and I guess I can just share, we do have interest and have been trying to coordinate a little bit of paired sampling as well to try to coordinate the test strips with some bulk water chemistry testing that would be done by certified labs to just help us, again, kind of contain the variability of the test strip data. We had a couple questions about folks just with different versions of phones and not being able to get servicing. Do you want to try to tackle that, Dan?
Yeah, I know there's been issues both not seeing the app in the Apple Store. I think that the issues that I've seen have been with iPhone 7, some with 8, although the 8 versions have been more test strip alignment on the calibration card with the photo recognition piece. But I know that those are on our radar to address. But I think it's in part an older phone issue is where we've been seeing the issues pop up. And I'm not the one to speak to the sort of advancing technology and what drives the changes in operating systems and why the bugs are coming, but I know that those have been relayed to Carter. He's tracking those. He's the one working with his developers on enhancements and trying to address issues in the app.
Would you say that you're compiling those kinds of issues and bundling them up for Carter so that if folks had them, we could kind of collate them?
I have not been. I know Carter and Kent Johnson, who's been engaging with or providing assistance with the chapters that at least have monitoring plans, have been compiling them.
Thanks so much, Dan.